All right, everybody, welcome in to another episode of the NFL Seekers podcast. Today, we are going to be predicting and deep diving into the AFC West. We'll be talking about each team's offseason, starting lineups, and at the end, we'll each predict the winner of the division and the division award winners as well. And this division hits really close to home for us. Josh is a Chargers fan. I'm a big Broncos fan. This should definitely be a really fun one. How are you, Josh?
Doing good. Shout out to Jay Herbo breaking the contract record, getting the highest paid player ever contract, $256 million, $100 million in his second year in the contract. So big shout out to Herbo. Really excited for that. He's going to be a Charger for a long time and hopefully many Super Bowls to come. But this division definitely hits close to home. One of the most exciting divisions, always close, tough, rough matchups, full of superstars, probably the most superstar loaded, talented division. I'm not just saying that because our teams are in there, but the AFC West truly has superstars. And if you look at this cover photo that we have right here, I mean, you got Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, two top five quarterbacks, the best corner in the league in Pat Surtain, one of the best receivers in the league in Devontae Adams. So just crazy, crazy, crazy talent. And couldn't be more excited to talk about this one.
Yep, just absolutely star-studded division. With that, we'll get into the 2022 recap. And the Super Bowl champion Chiefs finished first at 14-3. The Chargers finished second and made the wild card round of the playoffs with a 10-7 record. The Raiders finished third at 6-11, and then the Broncos, who had just a complete disaster season, finished at 5-12 and last in the division.
Yeah, absolute meltdown on the Broncos. Definitely shouldn't have gone that bad for the Broncos. It was just a weird, awkward season. Russ couldn't quite figure it out. But hopefully bigger things to come for you guys this season. New coaching staff, new regime, fresh start. But yeah, shout out to the Chiefs, of course. Pat Mahomes are going to be competing every single year for a Super Bowl, which is just absolutely disastrous for both me and you, your mental health.
Yeah.
And then the Raiders, I feel like the Raiders the Raiders are the Raiders and the Chargers are the Chargers. So it's just a fun division though. Fun division, always close.
And with that, we'll get into the team deep dives, starting with the Broncos, who finished last in the division. And just an overview of the 2022 Broncos, I will say they were the most injured team in the league last year. Football Outsiders did a stat that showed that the Broncos had the most missed games by starters by just a country mile. It wasn't even close. The next closest team was closer to like
Probably
the eighth
Chargers.
closest team.
Was it the
I think the
Chargers?
Ravens were second. The Chargers were fourth. I think the
Oh,
Titans were third.
geez.
Yeah, so the Chargers were fourth. The Chargers were also an injury-riddled team that we'll talk about here soon. But yeah, just between the injuries and Nathaniel Hackett, the Broncos really did have just a disastrous season, unlucky season, just a dumpster fire season. And I think with those things gone, we can hope for a better 2023. The Broncos were big spenders this offseason as well. So we'll get into their offseason. When getting into their offseason, you have to just talk about the addition of Sean Payton. Going from Nathaniel Hackett to Sean Payton is just absolutely massive. Words don't even really describe how big that can be for the offense and Russ. They proved a lot spending all this money. They spent the most money in the NFL this offseason. They proved that they want to compete in this division with this really tough division that you guys will see here soon. They also bring in Mike McGlinchey to shore up that right tackle position that the Broncos have literally had a turnstile at for literally since they won the Super Bowl in 2015. They haven't had a good, solid starting right tackle. So Mike McGlinchey is a really, really good signing for them, much needed one. They also bring in Ben Powers, a offensive guard who is a great pass protector, and he had a mini breakout season last year for the Ravens. So that'll be a little upgrade to Dalton Risner at the left guard spot. So attacking that offensive line is pretty big. They added Samjay P. Ryan to be a really good backup running back. Javonte Williams got hurt last year, so it's some really needed insurance. And then they added Adam Troutman and Marquez Callaway, two ex-Saints players who were literally just brought over to be essentially on-field coaches, kind of help the younger weapons learn the offense faster. So I like that a lot. And then on the defense, they brought in Zach Allen and Frank Clark on the defensive line, much needed because their biggest loss was Draymond Jones to the Seahawks. And he's a really, really good defensive lineman, but they paid Zach Allen less money. And Zach Allen had a breakout season last year for the Cardinals. So I think that's a pretty underrated signing, and Frank Clark will definitely help the depth of that edge room. The Broncos also lost Dalton Risner, which isn't too big, as I said they replaced him, and then I think their biggest loss could be Brandon McManus. When you consider they replaced him for Elliott Fry and Brett Maher, I think that could lose them games. I think that's gonna end up being kind of a disaster.
Yeah, the Broncos definitely proved this year that they were not afraid to spend and be bold. I mean, the going out there and trading a first round pick for a head coach just shows how desperate they were for some leadership and, somebody to take authority and get control over this locker room and get control over this team. Because, I mean, all the reports coming out about Russell Wilson and, all the complaints, and he has his own office and he has his team three, in the building. And it was poorly managed last year. And so the Broncos, went out there, spent big, got the most expensive coach in the NFL and, traded a first round pick for him, which is crazy. You don't see that too often, but it just shows that they wanted to get this locker room under control. And they went out and spent big. They were not afraid to spend big. I mean, the Broncos had a disappointing season and should have never been as bad as their record was last year. I mean, it was just unacceptable, to be honest. It was just unacceptable. It never should have happened. I mean, with how much talent's on that team, 5-12 is just not acceptable. Not, and especially with a Super Bowl winning quarterback, leading your team. So it was just not acceptable. But they did go out, make some good key, additions. Zach Allen, very underrated. Samon P. Ryan, very underrated. But yeah, they definitely showed that they weren't afraid to be bold and to make some big moves. And, and Mike McGlinchey, to shore up that right side with Ben Powers is going to be huge. And so, Russell was beat up a lot last year, hit a lot last year. So I'm, with the new coaching regime and new system, I think we should see big improvements for the Broncos going forward.
Yeah, things were just such a mess last year, and with Sean Payton coming in, he's going to make everything so much more tidier, so much cleaner. Just it's going to be a lot smoother this year for the Broncos offense, especially, and should be pretty fun to watch. We'll get into the Broncos roster with that, and I guess we'll start off with Russell Wilson. He's the biggest kind of just piece of this offense. It all relies on him. He was terrible last year, and this team was terrible because of it. So they need him to play at a decent level. They need Sean Payton to be able to rejuvenate Russell Wilson with all this talent around him. And if he can, this team definitely can be dangerous, but it all relies on Russ. They got Javonte Williams and Sanjay P. Ryan as a really good backup running back duo, I mean. And Javonte Williams practiced today in training camp. So that's pretty big. Looks like he's going to be out there week one, and they're going to have him for the full season, which is huge. He's a really good running back in there. Probably going to feature their offense through Javonte Williams. So that's big. Their receiving trio is really good. Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick on the outside with Jerry Jeudy kind of moving around as their best separator, best receiver, just best overall player that I'm really excited to watch. He kind of broke out at the end of last year, and I expect him to keep that pace this year and be a really, really solid receiver. Him and Russ built a pretty good connection. They also have Marquez Callaway, Marvin Mims, who they drafted in the second round, and KJ Hamler, who is also a second round pick, as backup. So it'll be interesting to see how that receiving room plays out. There's 6 pretty solid receivers. Their offensive line is also hugely improved with Garrett Bowles coming back from injury. He only played 5 games last year. Ben Powers, big upgrade over Risner, who's a liability. Lloyd Cushenberry, who's kind of come into his own the last few years. And Quinn Miners, I think, will be an absolute breakout guard this year. He could be one of the better guards in the NFL. He has just absolutely freakish potential, and really excited for him. And then Mike McGlinchey to shore up the right tackle position is huge. It's something the Broncos have needed for a long time. He needs to work on his pass protection, but it's better than anything the Broncos have had in years past. So I love it. And I also love Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman behind him. I think it's going to be a really fun offense, and hopefully Greg Dulcich can break out.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, the whole this whole regime and everything is gonna center around Russell Wilson and how he plays. The team will go as far as Russ can take them. And I hope Russ kind of puts his head down and he, stops being such a media guy and doing Danger Witch sandwiches and shit like that. And and just being a little cocky. He's a little cocky, a little arrogant last year, and he just kind of became a meme. But, I hope he puts his head down a little bit more this year. And I hope that, I hope the team rallies around him, because I do want to see the Broncos do good, because they have such a good, talented roster. And then such an underrated addition was wide receiver Marvin Mims, out of Oklahoma, a guy that was drastically, for some whatever reason just was never very high on people's draft boards, and should have gone a lot higher, because I mean, this dude is an absolute stud. He can get down the field, he can run the route tree, and I think very quickly he could become, I think he'll probably overtake Tim Patrick at some point this season, because I think his skill set is a little bit more wide ranged and he's a little bit more of a gadget player. But absolutely love the receiving core, starting up front with Jerry Jeudy. I think him and Russ finally got that connection the last few weeks last year, so they should be building off of that, and then the Broncos offensive line, getting Garrett Bowles and back from injury, Ben Powers, Lloyd Cushenberry, Quinn, however you say his last name, just blanked in my head.
Minor.
Minor, and then Mike McGlinchey. It's looking pretty good. And Adam Troutman's another underrated player coming over from the Saints. So it's gonna be fun to see this offense click with Sean Payton.
And Cam Fleming is also one of the better swing tackles in the NFL too. So that was a big re-signing, getting him back for 1 year. Really good last year, filling in as a starter for Garrett Bowles. He's a really good swing tackle. And then, it all depends on Slim Russ. Russell Wilson lost a lot of weight this offseason. Like you said, he's got to focus in. He's got to work out more. He's got to be in better shape, because last year he was looking a little out of shape. So hopefully that can be what changes him. And we'll go to the defense, which is going to be a really stout group. It always is for the Broncos. You got Zach Allen coming in to replace Draymond Jones, DJ Jones, who's a really solid nose tackle. Matt Henningsen's kind of the weak link of the defensive line, but I liked him as a prospect coming out of Wisconsin. He's a lot of potential. The edge group is fun with Frank Clark coming over from Kansas City. You got Baron Browning and Randy Gregory, as well as Nick Bonito, who was a second-round pick last year. So it'll be a heavy rotation. They're all going to be rotating almost every play. A lot of options, no real alpha unless Randy Gregory stays healthy and reaches that potential. But I like the group. Baron Browning showed that he can be a really fun pass rusher. The middle linebackers are a solid group. They're really good run defenders. Two of the better run defending linebackers, Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell. They're just their problem is they're a little bit of a liability, running across the field in coverage, guarding posts. That's just something that's kind of held the Broncos back, which definitely leads into the third-round pick, Drew Sanders. I think he'll earn a starting job by the end of the season, be a really good future linebacker for the Broncos. He's really athletic and can definitely cover, so I want him to start ASAP. And then getting into the secondary, headlined by, like you said, the best corner in the NFL, Patrick Surtain. Absolutely love him. He's just so fun to watch. He's a delight to watch. If you guys like corner and defensive play, go watch the Broncos and go watch Pat Surtain, because he is so technically refined, so technically sound, and a perfect corner prospect. You have Damari Mathis opposite of him, who is a name that not too many people know, but he was a solid last year as a rookie. I liked him as a prospect coming out of Pitt. So he's a pretty solid starting corner. You would like to maybe bring in a veteran. They brought in Riley Moss in the third round to also compete. And Kawan Williams is a really good slot corner, one of the better run defending slot corners in the NFL, just a really good veteran. And then they had the safety duo for a long time of Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson. I think Caden Stearns will kind of take over Kareem Jackson's role this year, but a really solid and deep defense. I like it a lot.
Yeah, this defense always seems to be solid. It just seems to be the culture of the Broncos defense. But it all starts with Pat Surtain. As long as the Broncos have Pat Surtain on their defense, I think he's, the kind of the king of the chessboard right there. He's going to be the guy that you can move around, and he allows you to make your defense more flexible and play harder coverages. But yeah, I'm going to say it's this defense, if Pat Surtain, he's got to stay healthy and got to stay on the field, because he's the difference maker on this team. Also, absolutely. I mean, this defense, I think, actually has really solid depth. Behind your starting, line, you got Mike Parcells, Frank Clark, Nick Bonito, all the way back there in the third spot right now. So it's looking actually pretty solid, pretty strong. I think the Broncos have a lot of big things coming on defense. They always seem to play good competitive defense. And I think it all starts, with Pat Surtain and Justin Simmons back there, just two guys that can almost cover the entire field themselves. It feels like, but two stars, two studs. Absolutely love Justin Simmons. We're fortunate enough to play a couple games of Fortnite with him once a
That's fun.
while back. Me and Dan. Shout out to Justin Simmons for playing with us.
Good
Super
guy.
cool dude. Absolutely love him. Trying to recruit him over to the Chargers. It didn't work, but absolutely love Justin Simmons, and he's such an underrated name. That Justin Simmons has just been the top of his position for a long time, and I absolutely love the guy. So that secondary with just I mean, I don't even have to talk about the other guys. It's just Justin Simmons and Pat Surtain, just two studs that take away the throwing against teams. So, but the Broncos, they'll be a competitive defense this year, of course, as always.
Yep, super polarizing team. It'll be really fun to watch the Broncos and see how they do with Sean Payton coming over. With that, we'll go into the Las Vegas Raiders, who were interesting last year. They were more competitive than people think. Their offense was actually pretty competitive. Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams are just such superstars. We'll get into their notable offseason additions, which is obviously bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G, to be their bridge quarterback until they find a franchise quarterback. Not the worst. He's pretty much a wash with Derek Carr. He might be a little more like efficient. You know what you're getting with Jimmy G more than Derek Carr, who's a little sporadic. They bring in Jacoby Myers to be, I don't know if he's going to be on the outside or a slot receiver. It's going to be a little interesting to see how him and Hunter Renfrow coincide. Don't love the signing. Jacoby Myers is a good slot receiver, but I just don't think he's a better slot receiver than Hunter Renfrow. We'll see. Austin Hooper and Michael Mayer were brought in to replace Darren Waller and Foster Moreau. I hope they use Michael Mayer a lot. He was a fun prospect. They bring in Tyree Wilson with the 7th overall pick, an absolute monster out of Texas Tech. Just a really fun beast of a prospect. And they just barely signed Marcus Peters to be their CB1. And then they brought over Marcus Epps from the Eagles to be a pretty good safety, starting safety for them. So their additions weren't anything crazy. Their losses were Derek Carr, Darren Waller, and Foster Moreau, as I mentioned. They lost Matt Collins, which is actually a decently big loss because they don't really have a big outside receiver. As I said, Jacoby Myers and Renfrow are both slot receivers. So it'll be interesting to see who replaces Matt Collins because everyone was double teaming Devontae Adams, leaving Matt Collins wide open. I don't know who the Matt Collins is going to be this year. They also lost Clelin Ferrell and Denzel Perryman, and Denzel Perryman was a beast last year. So, any thoughts on those losses?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. The Raiders' full franchise right now is just kind of confusing me. It's kind of a head scratcher. I don't really understand the direction they're going in. I don't really understand the Jimmy G signing. I mean, I get that you want to move off of Derek Carr, and he's, like you said, maybe a little bit more sporadic of a quarterback. Maybe Jimmy G doesn't make as stupid of decisions, I think he's a little bit more calm and cool under pressure, but I don't feel like you're getting any kind of upgrade. And they definitely did pay Jimmy G quite a lot of money for just being a mid-tier quarterback. And I don't really understand signing a mid-tier quarterback when you have, 3 other quarterbacks in your division, 2 that have won Super Bowls and one that's, all playing. I mean, all 3 have been at all pro levels. And so, top of their game. I don't really understand, I would have liked to seen the Raiders, I mean, fortunate for us, I don't want to see the Raiders succeed personally, but it would be interesting, for their franchise, if they're making a smart move, go up and get somebody exciting. Why aren't you trading up in the draft? Why aren't you getting a Will Levis? Why aren't you shooting on something like that? Maybe they're tanking for Caleb or something next year. Who knows? We'll see. I hope not. But it is interesting. I don't feel like the Derek Carr to Jimmy G really made a lot of sense, especially when they got no compensation out of Derek Carr. It just kind of makes me laugh. But yeah, I did actually think they had a little bit of an underrated draft. I really did like Tyree Wilson with the 7th overall pick, and then snagging Michael Mayer in the 2nd round is very very, very underrated. Nicknamed Baby Gronk. I think he can go out there and be very solid. I think he's a very underrated fantasy prospect too. For our fantasy episode. Look at him kind of being like a George Kittle, maybe not as good, but for Jimmy G. And then Denzel Perryman, I'd like to speak on him a little bit. The dude's an absolute monster. He runs the middle of the field, and that is a huge loss. And I don't feel like they really replaced him. But that's an absolute huge loss on the defensive side of the ball for them.
They definitely did not replace him. With that, we'll get into the roster. And like you said, they could tank and be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes if Jimmy G gets hurt because their backups are the worst in the league. They have Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell as the backups. So their season would be over, and that could be the contingency plan. It's just a tank if Jimmy G gets hurt. So that'll be interesting. The receiving core, like I said, I do have question marks with obviously Devontae Adams. Just last year, let's just talk about him for a second. He was so incredible. Didn't take a step down coming over from the beautiful connection he had with Aaron Rodgers, where they had that back shoulder perfect connection on any third down, on any given play. They just had some of the best connection, quarterback to receiver connection in NFL history, simply Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. So the fact that he came over here and didn't really take any of a step down in production, it's pretty incredible. It just shows that he's a top 5 receiver in NFL history. He truly is. He's that guy. Outside of him, Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow, they're good receivers in their own rights. I just wish that you only had one of them and one of them wasn't playing on the outside, because I don't know who's going to be playing on the outside between those two. I guess it's going to be Jacoby Myers, but he's not really good at that. And Hunter Renfrow is a better slot receiver than him. So I don't know. Maybe that's bold. Maybe I'm being harsh. I just think that they could have signed a better outside receiver. Their depth isn't great as well. There's really nothing to talk about other than Trey Tucker, who's a speedy guy that definitely has potential. The Raiders like their speedy receivers. And then they have Josh Jacobs, who was, in my opinion, the best running back in the NFL last year. Just an absolute beast. He had the most yards in the NFL. If you played against the Raiders, you hated Josh Jacobs after, because he runs for like 10 yards every single play, and he just wears down your defense. And he's just that old school running style running back that's really fun to watch. Their offensive line's all right. Colton Miller is one of the better left tackles in the NFL, so you love that. Dylan Parham struggled last year. I liked him as a prospect, but he simply struggled. I guess they're going to trust him to play on the left side in their starting lineup to start the season, which is a little scary. He really struggles on the left side. He's one of those linemen that prefer the right side, and they struggle when they're on the left. So another questionable just front office and coaching decision by McDaniels and the Raiders. Andre James at center and Alex Bars at right guard is definitely nothing to write home about. And then Jermaine Illuminor is a decent starting right tackle. And then they have Austin Hooper as their starting tight end. I hope that they get Michael Mayer more involved, though, because he's a really solid option.
Yeah, this is an interesting offense. I would honestly go so far to say their offensive line is kind of a dumpster fire, in my humble opinion. I don't think it's good. I think it's bottom tier in the NFL. But this offense is going to revolve around Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. I mean, when you got Devontae Adams getting 180 targets last year and Josh Jacobs getting 300 plus touches, that's what you have to focus your offense around. You got 2 stars, and you got to find a way to get them the ball. But kind of funny stat, Devontae Adams was targeted 180 times and came down with 100 catches. So they're definitely targeting the hell out of him. But a lot of the times, Derek Carr was missing them. So it'll be interesting to see
That's pretty bad.
That is pretty bad.
I'm not excited for next episode is NFC South, so we're gonna be having to talk about the Saints, and I'm not excited for that. Derek Carr was bad.
Yeah, so I mean that's not a very good stat. You don't like to see that, but I mean you gotta focus. You got to get the ball in his hands because he's not dropping much, and he's making your team better. But like you kind of mentioned, the way this receiver core is set up just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, they really have 4 slot receivers, or if even 5 with Philip Dorsett, if you really want to say it. I mean, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfrow, DeAndre Carter, Trey Tucker. It's kind of just like doesn't make sense. It's like a hamster wheel. It's just the same like repeating cycle. You don't really have too much flexibility or too much difference in that offense right there. And it'll be interesting to see because I mean, like it kind of just goes down. Hunter Renfrow is just a better version of DeAndre Carter, and it just goes down. So it's interesting. But yeah, this offense has got to solely focus around getting Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams the ball. But I just don't think they're going to be good enough as of right now to really compete, in this division, to say the least. I don't think Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams will be enough, but that is their offense, and those are two star players that I absolutely love.
Yeah, two really fun players. Definitely get them in fantasy. It just sucks that they haven't really surrounded them with the best cast and the best offensive line. We'll get into the defense, which is Max Crosby against the world as it's been the last few years. Let's be real. My favorite player in the NFL. I'm going to say it as a Broncos fan. Max Crosby is my favorite player. It feels a little sacrilegious, but I don't care. I love the guy. He's so fun, such a fun story. Their interior is a little suspect with Jerry Tillery and Bilal Nichols.
Jerry Tillery.
I
Tillery.
will say, I know you're a
He's a
Chargers fan.
starter.
I know
He's
you're a
a
Chargers
starter.
fan. I will say Jerry Tillery did have a decent little rejuvenation when he went over to the Raiders last year. He was all right for them and he earned a contract. He was terrible for the Chargers. I do think there is a world where he can somewhat do a little late career rejuvenation here in Vegas, and he's a former first round pick. We liked him as a prospect. Let's be real. He was terrible for the Chargers, but I think
Yeah.
he can be decent for the Raiders. He finished the season all right. I'll let you talk about him in a minute. Their edge room is opposite of Max Crosby is Chandler Jones competing with Tyree Wilson, who was their top 10 pick, who's going to be really good. I think Tyree Wilson will eventually earn that starting role. That'll be an interesting storyline to follow when exactly he earns that starting role. But when he does, him and Max Crosby are going to wreak havoc on the AFC West. And like you said, they didn't really replace uh, Denzel Perryman because their starting linebacking core is Robert Spillane and Divine Diablo. I actually like Divine Diablo. He is athletic, but Robert Spillane is definitely going to be a liability in the AFC West. Teams are going to be picking him apart. Their secondary is Marcus Peters and Nate Hobbs as their two top corners. And then they have Brandon Facyson, David Long, Duke Shelley, Tyler Hall, all kind of competing for that third corner spot, which isn't the worst in the world. Between one of them will probably be pretty good. Trayvon Morig is a really good free safety. And then Marcus Epps coming over is solid. He was a solid third safety for the Eagles last year. I do like their fifth round pick, Chris Smith from Georgia. I think he could be a good starting safety down the road.
Yeah. They do have a couple, there's some talent on this defense. Of course, starting up front with Max Crosby, an absolute beast, and then getting their first round pick, Tyree Wilson. I do love that edge duo with Chandler Jones, as the third guy. He's gonna have, I like that. He's getting older towards the end of his career. And, being kind of a rotational player, when you can put him in pass rush specific situations, I think they'll thrive with that for sure. Jerry Tillery is an absolute meme to me. That guy's a joke. He did play better for the Raiders than he did the Chargers, but the guy's an absolute clown. I'll say it. He's just disappointed. He's an absolute weirdo, very toxic locker room guy. And the Chargers during midseason just had enough of him. And, thank goodness, because that dude was an absolute disaster. I mean, teams would just push him back. I mean, you could have a 4-string center, absolutely pancaking this dude. He is no good in the run game, and he's an absolute liability. I mean, and then, say something nice about him after just destroying him right there, because the guy's a clown. He does have an okay pass rushing set, there's a reason he was a first round pick. He does get up the field with a high motor, but oh boy, when an offensive lineman is going forward in the run game, that guy is just a clown, and he's going to get run over, and he sucks, and I hate him.
He definitely does get pushed back. I'll give you that. He gets pushed back.
Yeah. And then, shout out to Marcus Peters signing this week with the Raiders. Feels like a Raiders type of player,
Shout out to the NFL Seekers. I called that in our free agency predictions episode almost over a month ago. So
yeah, shout out us.
NFL Seekers.
Calling this over a month ago. Let's go. But just feels like a total Raiders player, kind of a dirty player, kind of, just the thug kind of guy. But I think he'll fit that system well, and I think he'll be aggressive and actually play well. But I think teams are absolutely, to be honest with you, going to expose that secondary. I think they're very easily going to be thrown on. I think, to be honest, outside of Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, and Tyree Wilson, I think, if one of those guys not on the field, teams can probably easily run against this team, because if they get past that second level or that first level, these linebackers ain't doing much. But being said, maybe they'll surprise us. We'll see, but definitely not high on the Raiders. Definitely not high on their defense.
Yep. And with that, we'll get into the Los Angeles Chargers, who finished second in the division. Your favorite team. This will be a really fun one. They're going to have a really good season this year. They're really fun team, a really fun offense, and they brought someone over that we'll talk about in a second that's going to completely change the landscape and just the future of this team, the upside, the ceiling of this team is now there is no ceiling. They can definitely compete up there with the Chiefs in the top of the AFC. So the Chargers are going to be really fun, and let's get into their offseason additions. We have to start with them bringing in Kellen Moore to replace Joe Lombardi as the offensive coordinator, which is easily the most impactful move of the offseason for the Chargers, possibly any team in the NFL. And it could be the main reason they take the jump up to be real competitors at the top of the league with the Chiefs. Really good signing, just a great offensive coordinator in my mind, a top 3 to 5 just play caller in the NFL. Really creative, going to completely open up this Chargers offense and make it really fun for Justin Herbert. And just, I think they're going to be very efficient in the red zone, and that might be the biggest difference this year for the Chargers.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't be more excited to talk about Kellen Moore and what he's going to bring to this offense. I mean, it felt like last year, us Charger fans were just shooting ourselves in the foot and just punching the wall because we were so frustrated because we have this all pro quarterback with, one of the best arms, we've ever seen. I mean, this dude can launch the ball 70 yards down the field off his back foot, rolling out to the right, slinging it all the way to the left. I mean, he's just quite frankly amazing. And it felt like his skill set with Joe Lombardi was just drastically not used right and underutilized. And Kellen Moore brings a young, fresh, creative mind to this offense where he's going to, marry the run with the pass game and really open up this play action and deep ball down the field. And what better addition to bring in to complement that than rookie wide receiver Quentin Johnston out of TCU. As you see on the screen right here, this guy is electric. The Chargers were missing that guy, who with yak yards after the catch ability. But I mean, this is just those two alone are going to be so exciting to this offense, and get all the Chargers players you can in fantasy because this offense is going to be electric this year.
Yep. You spoke of Quentin Johnston, who will be a really fun addition to this offense. He's going to be like a little Debo for them in the intermediate game. He can take handoff sweeps, be a really fun piece, a really good first round pick with really high upside. He could definitely be their wide receiver one in the future with Justin Herbert. So definitely stash him in your dynasty leagues. They added Tuli Peloto and Dion Henley as well, who I think will play roles on the defense as rookies. And then their one really only veteran addition was Eric Kendricks to go in and play middle linebacker. He played his college ball down the road at UCLA, which is pretty fun. And Eric Kendricks has been one of the better coverage linebackers in the NFL the last few years. So you definitely have to love that. Their notable losses weren't anything too big at all. They lost Matt Filer, a starting tackle, to the Bucks, which will be, not a great loss. He was a pretty solid lineman. Drew Tranquil, they did lose to the division rival Chiefs, which hurts a little. Kyle Van Noy, Bryce Callahan also left, 2 veterans, and then Nas Adderley, the safety, retired out of nowhere, which was a little interesting.
Yeah, definitely random. Yeah, Matt Filer was definitely a very solid lineman. Thankfully, we have a guy to step into his place with, standout rookie tackle / guard Jamari Sawyer, who will be stepping in at right guard for Matt Filer. And then we are getting, Rashawn Slater back from injury this year, which couldn't be, more talked about to me because that is one of the biggest, additions this season is getting an all-pro left tackle back to protect Justin Herbert. And then adding Eric Kendricks was very underrated. This guy's going to come in and be our green dot caller. He's going to run the defense. I think he is definitely a substantial upgrade in the run game over Drew Tranquil, and pass game probably about equal. Eric Kendricks is getting older, but I think he'll be able to communicate to the defense and lead the defense a lot better than Drew Tranquil was able to. But shout out to Drew Tranquil. He's going to the Chiefs, of course. Definitely a really good player. Sad to lose him, but that definitely felt like the biggest loss. But yeah, exciting offseason. Excited to see what this team can do. But they're going to definitely be electric on offense. And it might be a top 3 offense this year.
Yeah, and we'll get into that awesome offense. It's going to be really electric and fun. We'll start with the robot Justin Herbert. Just doesn't really make sense, the throws that he can make, the speed at which he can throw, the accuracy that he can place those balls. It's pretty incredible. He has a great connection with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Excited to see him build one up with Quentin Johnston, who I think is going to be great in the Chargers offense. It could not be a better situation for someone like Quentin Johnston to go into. The receiving court is Mike Williams on the outside, Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen kind of moving around. And then they brought in Darius Davis in the 4th round, which could be interesting. He will be their gadget guy this year. They lost DeAndre Carter to the Raiders. They have Joshua Palmer, who had a decent season filling in for the injured starters last year. And then Jalen Guyton, who still hasn't came back from injury quite yet, but he can definitely stretch the field. So there's definitely options for this offense to stretch the field and put up some high scoring games with Kellen Moore calling plays. They've got a really improved offensive line. A few years ago, the Chargers had one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and they've really attacked that. They got Rashawn Slater coming back, which is just massive. One of the better left tackles in the NFL already. Zion Johnson, who was a pick I loved, a great prospect coming out of Boston College. Corey Linsley, one of the better centers in the NFL still. He's been one for a while. And like you said, Jamari Salyer, he's going to be great right guard. He was great at left tackle, filling in for Rashawn Slater as a rookie, which is really not easy to do, especially as the 6th round pick. So you love that. And then Trey Pipkins to me is the one question mark. I personally would have just kept Filer and started him at right tackle, but Trey Pipkins did end the season pretty well. So that'll be not terrible for your weak link of your offensive line. And then you have to talk about Austin Eckler, who's just a great receiving back, the best receiving back, let's be real. And he's slept on between the tackles. He gets the job done as a runner as well. So you love that. I want to see him get Isaiah Spiller more involved, but just a great offense that's going to put up a lot of points, target every single one of these guys in fantasy.
Yeah. This offense, and I'm maybe a little bit of bias, but it absolutely is ridiculous. I mean, this is, like we say every year, the Chargers are one of the best teams on paper. But will that team on paper translate to the field? That's going to be my biggest question mark. I'm such a sucker for being so hopeful, and during the offseason, it's all good until the season hits. But if the Chargers and maybe Kellen Moore and what culture and system he brings, they can finally get over that hump of being, the team that is always good on paper, but always falls apart during the season. But, Justin Herbert getting this big contract, I think there's going to be kind of a fire lit under his ass. And the team's ass. These guys this is kind of their year. They are next year, I think, close to $60 million over the cap. So this was kind of their all-in year. They went out, they've spent big, they've secured their offensive line. I think there's really 5 solid starters with Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, Corey Linsley. That's a ridiculous left side of the line. I mean, that should drastically improve the run game. Having Rashawn Slater at left tackle should drastically improve the pass game and pass protection. And then Salyer and Pipkins on the right side, which, is not anything to write home about, but it definitely is solid. And we'll definitely see how they play last year. Trey Pipkins was an absolute laughing stock the first few years of his career. And then, going into the final year of his rookie contract, stepped up and actually played really well and held his own. So we'll see how that translates to year 2 of, hopefully he plays well this year. And then the Chargers tight ends, Gerald Everett and Donald Parham, kind of a slept on duo. Nothing super fantastic. Definitely no Travis Kelce, but they can go out there and get the job done. And then, there's the star-studded wide receiver core. Adding Quentin Johnston kind of puts them over the top. I mean, having a guy like Josh Palmer as your 4 is awesome. And then getting Jalen Guyton back this year, kind of rumors that he might, be a cut candidate and might not make the roster. He's starting out on the PUP list, but he was very notable loss for the Chargers after week 3 against Jacksonville when he got hurt. That's kind of when the offense started falling apart and couldn't stretch the ball down the field, because he's a true 4-3 type of guy that can really stretch this offense out. And then Darius Davis is going to be very interesting to me. Definitely a dude with burner speed. Is he going to be? I assume his role is going to be immediately impacted on special teams, but we'll see what he does on offense. He's definitely a burner. Definitely it could be fun with some, end around and gadget plays. But overall, I'm super excited, super hopeful for this team. I just hope this fantastic paper roster translates to the field.
What were your thoughts on the Max Duggan pick?
Now that I was kind of irritated, kind of thought it was funny because, going getting three TCU guys is kind of, maybe it's good for rookie Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis to have some familiar faces around and a guy they're familiar with, but kind of laughable. It probably would have been better to get, a position of need. But now with the 49ers rule change of three quarterbacks, then the third one doesn't count towards a roster spot on game day is nice. So it's fine. They've always rostered three quarterbacks, and that's always upset me why they didn't just roster two. But now with the three quarterback rule, it's fine. It's fine. It'll definitely be interesting. These backups are, you know, cross our I have to cross my fingers Justin Herbert stays healthy, because if he's hurt, the season's over. they're not going very far without him.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. Obviously, it's a seventh round pick. It doesn't mean much. I think it's actually a pretty good pick when you consider meshing Quentin Johnson and Darius Davis better. And also, I think he's better than Easton Stick. I think he's a better runner than Easton Stick, which is the only thing Stick is good at. And yeah, just not a bad option. I mean,
no, I mean, he led TCU to the best season they've ever had, which, I mean, the guy's a winner. I mean, you go out there and you're able to do that and go to the national championship game, absolutely get embarrassed by Georgia, but still, I mean, you went past all these legit SEC teams and were able to, lead your team there. So that kind of says something about Max Duggan.
Yeah, Sean Clifford went in the fifth round, and Max Duggan was definitely better, and he went in the seventh. So that's definitely not a bad pick. I was just curious. We'll go into the Chargers defense. We'll start it off with the defensive line. In the interior, you've got Morgan Fox, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Austin Johnson. Morgan Fox was really good for the Chargers last year. He's a really good pass rushing interior rusher. I was telling you before the season to watch out for Morgan Fox. He's going to be a underrated piece for the Chargers that no one was really talking about, even Chargers fans. And then they've got a great edge rush duo, obviously one of the better in the NFL, with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. And a big thing is with those two being a little bit injury prone in past years, bringing in Tuli Tuipulotu to be the third edge, which is something the Chargers have lacked for a few years now, and that'll be big. I think he's a really good prospect. And Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, can't talk about them for too much. I mean, they're just so good, legends, top 10 edge rushers, just so fun. You've got Kenneth Murray and Eric Kendricks as the middle linebackers. I will say I expect Dion Henley to overtake Kenneth Murray sometime very soon, early in the season. I think that he's just a similar player, but just a better player. I think he's already just as good as a run defender, even, and just as smart as a player. Like, I just don't see Kenneth Murray really keeping this job for too long, because Dion Henley is a really special talent. When you get into their secondary, they've got a little bit of an interesting dynamic with J.C. Jackson out all last season. He practiced it in the first day of training camp, so he is back. So it'll probably be him and Asante Samuel on the outside with, Michael Davis is actually locked to be an outside corner. So I guess I think Asante Samuel will play slot corner, but Jasir Taylor is listed as their starting slot. And you were saying as well that Jasir Taylor was playing over Asante Samuel today in camp as the starting slot, and JC Jackson was the starting outside guy alongside Michael Davis. So that's interesting. Obviously, it's not a bad situation to have. Those are all guys that can play. Jasir Taylor should, in my opinion, be the odd guy out. He should be the fourth corner, the guy that comes in. And then they have Derwin and Alohi Gilman with JT Woods backing up Gilman. Between the two, one should be all right. But love Derwin. Let's hear your thoughts on this defense.
Yeah, I'll start up front. Of course, Morgan Fox getting the starting spot after Jerry Tillery leaves and absolutely breaking out and getting 7 sacks as an interior defensive lineman. Very underrated. Signed him to a very team-friendly contract. He's going to be an absolute stud. Very excited to have him back. And Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson, 2 free agents last year that came over. Austin Johnson was very sneakily good, and then sadly was injured a few weeks into the season, and that was a big noticeable loss. But Sebastian Joseph Day held his own. Really good, one technique, nose tackle, can definitely get up there and plug the run. But I definitely think he needed another guy like Austin Johnson to complement him. So hopefully those two stay healthy. And then, of course, can't go too long without talking about Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. Sadly, we didn't really get to see them too much on the field last year. Joey Bosa was hurt in week 3, the disastrous class of the Jacksonville game Jacksonville absolutely just broke our hearts last season. Week 3, we lose Rashawn Slater, Joey Bosa, Jalen Guyton, all all in a humiliating game to Jacksonville, and then later blow a 27-point lead in the playoffs to them. I hate
Kryptonite.
them. They broke my soul as a Chargers fan. They crushed me, but hopefully Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack can stay on the field this year, because they could be an absolutely historically amazing edge tandem. Something very few times we see guys like this play on the field at the same time together. I mean, in the first game they played, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa combined for 4 sacks against the Raiders. I'm not saying the Raiders have a great line, but that was just kind of a sneak peek of what they're capable of when they're both at 100% and healthy. So hopefully that edge rushing duo stays healthy and they're able to stay on the field and go off together. And then super excited, Tui Tuipulotu too, coming out of USC, hometown kid. Kind of a flexibility play right here. I mean, he can play inside, he can play outside. Very excited to see what he can contribute to this team year 2. Should definitely be a substantial upgrade over Chris Rumph, especially in the run game. Chris Rumph is a little bit of a string bean, small guy, gets a little bit ran over at times. And then moving to the linebacking core with Eric Kendricks and Kenneth Murray. Eric Kendricks is going to come over here and immediately, be one of the team's best players. He's going to put up 100 tackles. He's their green dot. The defense runs around him. And I think that's really nice because Derwin James was the green dot, but I feel like that frees him up to play around the field a little bit more. And, you bring in a veteran guy with tons of leadership, former all pro, that should come over here and make an immediate better contribution than the previous year starter, Drew Tranquil. And then, moving to the secondary, it's kind of an interesting, battle right now. Michael Davis, for sure, an outside starter. The dude played some of the best football, one of the best corners, in my opinion, in the league. Very underrated, had the most pass breakups in the entire league, and kind of came out of nowhere. Had a pretty bad 2022 season, 2021 season, and then bounced back last year in 2022 and really, came into his own. And then, of course, we lost JC Jackson last year, who had a very, very bad injury, a torn patella tendon, which is very hard to come back from. Most players actually kind of never really fully recover, but it's kind of amazing. He's already back. He's already practicing. He's way ahead of schedule. It's super exciting. If we can get, 75% of what JC Jackson was in New England, I think we got a really good player there. And then, focal point of this defense is going to be Mr. Derwin James, one of the most electric, best safeties in the NFL. You can line this dude up at edge. You can line him at linebacker. You can put him at corner. He's just truly a specimen and a freak athlete that can do anything. So, again, I'll vouch and I'll say this defense really, really good on paper. We'll see how it translates to the field. I think Brandon Staley's got to do a little bit better job of communicating and, putting the defense in a position to win their matchups. But the Chargers did get rid of their defensive coordinator, which, kind of the guy behind Brandon Staley calls the plays. So we'll see. We'll see if the communication is a little bit better. I should know my defensive coordinator's name, but of course it just blanks from my mind. He was the former corners coach, but he was an absolute very vocal, very good leader. And this defense should be vastly improved because they really played to their full potential after playing the Dolphins, and then for like the last 4 weeks really played good football. But they just got to be more consistent.
Yeah, and one guy I wanted to mention real quick was Gerard Clark, the undrafted defensive tackle out of Coastal Carolina. I actually really liked him as a prospect and thought he should have been drafted. So that was a really good pickup for the Chargers in a position of need. So I think he will make the team and be a good player for them. And yeah, like you said, Michael Davis is probably the least known name in that secondary. And he was the guy that guarded the number 1 receivers last year. He's the guy that does all the dirty work and definitely deserves the credit. He was a top corner last year. So definitely love that. With that, we'll get into the Super Bowl champion juggernaut. Just disgusting to talk about at this point because they're so perfect. The dynasty is just getting started. Kansas City Chiefs. Not too excited to talk about this one, but it should be fun because this team is loaded and they have the best coach in the NFL, in my opinion, and Andy Reid.
Yeah, best coach in the NFL, best quarterback in the NFL, and best tight end in the NFL.
Yeah,
So I mean, that's kind of apparently all they need because they don't really need too many stars, and they proved that they lost Tyreek Hill, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're going to regress." Nope, they won a Super Bowl. So
they
as
know
long
the
as
recipe for success.
yeah, you got the three dudes, and as long as those guys are out there, Andy Reid's calling plays, Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, no one can quite figure out how Travis Kelsey's always open and Patrick Mahomes just doing Patrick Mahomes things. It's just it hurts. It hurts my soul. It hurts that they're in this division. Hurts that we have to go 2 games through them every year. It's always a disaster.
Yeah, as long as they have those top three, nothing else matters. We'll get into their notable offseason additions. They did add Jawan Taylor to be their right tackle to come in and replace Orlando Brown, who they was a big loss to the Bengals, a big loss. I guess we'll kind of just start with their notable losses because Orlando Brown was probably the biggest piece moving in or out of this team. That is a really big loss. He was a great left tackle for them. They won the Super Bowl. He's a big part of that. They also lost their starting right tackle, Andrew Wiley, to the Commanders, and he was really good, solid tackle. So they bring in Jawan Taylor to come in and be the right tackle. It was stated that he was going to be left tackle initially, but it looks like Donovan Smith is going to come over from Tampa to be their left tackle. So Jawan Taylor is going to stick at right tackle. They bring in Charles Omenihu from San Fran to be a really good edge rusher for them, and then they bring in Drew Tranquill from LA, like we just talked about, and then they also bring in Mike Edwards, who's a good safety from Tampa, to replace Juan Thornhill, who they lost. They also lost Frank Clark to Denver, as we mentioned earlier. And then they did lose McCole Hardman and Juju Smith-Schuster, two pieces of their receiving core that they're going to have to find production for elsewhere. Any notable offseason losses or additions that you want to talk about?
Yeah, like you said, and like you mentioned, Orlando Brown will be their biggest loss. I mean, because that dude was put him out there and he's shutting down that team's best edge rusher, and so that couldn't be spoke on more. I think Jawan Taylor, even though he is probably considered a better tackle in this league, I think he is a significant downgrade from Orlando Brown. And I think that one is gonna bite them a little bit, because Orlando Brown is an All Pro. I mean, that dude just goes out there and he gets the job done. And I do like Jawan Taylor. I do think he's a little handsy. I think he's gonna get calls with a lot of holds, and I don't think he's nearly as clean in his footwork or his run game is as lethal. But I mean, if you do lose a guy like Orlando Brown, at least you have a quality starter coming over to replace him. And then they got Drew Tranquill from the Chargers, which really hurt my heart and soul to see him go over to the Chiefs. And the funny thing is, he's just a depth piece on that team. He's not even going to start there. But wow, quality depth for the Chiefs on their defense. And then losing Andrew Wiley, pretty underrated too. They lost McCole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Frank Clark to the Broncos. So there was quite a bit of losses. But will that matter to the Chiefs? Probably not, because they have Patrick Mahomes.
Do they have Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelsey?
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of all you need on Sundays to win you a game. And they still have those three. So that kind of tells you about their team.
Yeah, and with that, we'll get into that great team. And starting with the Patrick Mahomes, I'll say it right here, right now. This is the greatest. Sorry, this is the best quarterback of all time. I'm not going to say the word greatest. This is the best quarterback of all time. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback we've ever seen with our eyes. He's a fantastic quarterback. He can do anything. He can do things that the league has never seen before. He has completely changed the NFL, which is very rare to do in this sport. He's just a complete juggernaut, dynamic, the most fun athlete to watch in sports right now. Just I could go on for days of just superlatives of how good Patrick Mahomes is. You've got Isaiah Pacheco, who came in last year as a 7th-round pick and finished the season really strong as their starting running back. I think he can build on that momentum and have a really good 2023. I think I'm targeting him in fantasy football this year. They had Jerick McKinnon as their backup, who was really good at the end of the last year. He's always good in the playoffs. It feels like they kind of save him as their secret weapon for the end of years. So I love that running back core. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a definite bust. Their receiving core is interesting. That feels like they have just a bunch of pieces that can play. No one crazy. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, who's a beast after the catch, but he just has to stay healthy. Sky Moore should be their starting slot, which is a little interesting. They brought in Richie James, which is fun. Rashee Rice in the second round. And then they also have Justin Ross, who has been impressing in camp. So keep an eye on Justin Ross out of Clemson. He was a hyped up prospect who has potential. Definitely could see him making a name for himself with this receiving core. And then, like I said, they brought in Donovan Smith, the veteran from Tampa, to be the left tackle. They've got the great Joe Tooney, one of the better guards in the NFL, if not the best. Creed Humphrey, he is the best center in the NFL. I think he took that crown from Frank Ragnow and Corey Lindsey last year. I think Creed Humphrey is the best center in the NFL already. And then they have Trey Smith and Jawan Taylor on the right, which is super solid and a lot of depth. One of the more deep offensive lines in the NFL as well. And then, yeah, to talk about Travis Kelce, this team's wide receiver one. He's the reason they don't have that top receiver. He is that guy. He's one of the better receivers in the NFL. He's just that guy. He's the best tight end in NFL history, if not top three. Just legendary, a beast. Like you said at the top, he just kind of gets open, and you are just left wondering, how did he do that? How is he so open every play? How is no one guarding this guy? It's crazy what they can do, man.
Yeah, I mean, this offense is just ridiculous, and no matter who's on the field with Pat Mahomes, he's just doing stupid things. I mean, he's making Justin Watson some games look like, wide receiver one. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, this guy is a specimen. He's a talent that we've never seen anything like it before. He has completely changed the NFL, and he is the best football player we've ever seen. He is the best probably of all time. And it's not crazy to say that right now because, I mean, yeah, Tom Brady, the most winning quarterback right now, has too many Super Bowls to count. But Pat Mahomes is a player. There's no one that you would choose to pick over him, even prime Brady, because no one is as good as Patrick Mahomes. What he is able to do, what creativity he's able to make on the spot. I mean, the throws he makes, we've never seen anything like it before. And this dude just leaves you scratching your head almost every single play and saying, how? How did he just do that? What just happened? Why am I throwing the remote at the wall? What did Patrick Mahomes just pull off this time? It's ridiculous. I mean, this guy is just on a whole another alien tier of his own. And he doesn't need insane. I mean, he has a solid surrounding cast. He always has, but he doesn't even need it. He has an absolute guru of a coach in Andy Reid, and then the best tight end of all time with Travis Kelce, who just is just amazing at getting open. I mean, it just all during the Super Bowl, and they even interviewed him after the Super Bowl, and I think it was old timer, the Steelers' old quarterback. What's his name?
Ben Roethlisberger?
No, the announcer. What was his
Oh,
old?
Bradshaw, Terry
Oh
Bradshaw.
yeah, Terry Bradshaw. He goes up to Travis Kelce and he's like, "How the hell are you getting so open every play?" Everyone in America is wondering, and it's just funny because that's just the story of the Chiefs. Anytime they need a big play, here's Patrick Mahomes rolling out, and then he's finding Travis Kelce down the field for 20, 30 yards, and they're in every game with these two. So you can't speak enough about those two. And then, the receiving core is interesting. It's just like a whole bunch of pieces, like you said, thrown together with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, Justin Watson, Sky Moore, Rashee Rice. And then Richie James is very underrated. He actually came on at the end of the year for the Giants and played some really good football. But, it doesn't matter who's thrown to. These guys are going to do good. And they'll catch some ridiculous balls because for whatever reason, Patrick Mahomes throws some weird 80-yard crossbody thing in the dirt, and one of these no-name undrafted receivers is catching it. It's just crazy. They all click, they all work together, and then a very underrated offensive line, all centering around Creed Humphrey, who's the best center in the NFL. So absolutely electric, crazy, crazy, crazy offense.
Yep. To add to what you said, Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all times as of now, but Patrick Mahomes is the most talented, best quarterback of all time, and he could definitely be the greatest. He's on track to be the
Yeah,
greatest.
you can't argue talent, and Patrick Mahomes is the most talented. So Tom Brady may be the GOAT, which he is just because of Super Bowls and how he wins, but Patrick Mahomes is the greatest player of all time.
And then we'll quickly talk about this Chiefs defense, which was improved, in my opinion, bringing over Charles Omenihu from San Fran, who was really good. They have George Karlaftis and Felix Anudike-Uzomah opposite of him, who's a really good first-round pick. I think he can be a good Frank Clark replacement. They're similar players, and staying in the state of Kansas, I think he'll be a really good starter for them. Derek Nottie and Chris Jones on the interior. Chris Jones is just a monster, one of the better defensive linemen in the NFL. Just a absolute beast. I think he had a shout to win Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's just a great player. They have Willie Gay and Nick Bolton as their starting linebackers, but they also have Leo Chenal and Drew Tranquill as their backup linebackers, which would probably be one of the better linebacker duos in the NFL if Leo Chenal and Drew Tranquill were both starters. So that's a crazy quad of linebackers. And then in the secondary, you've got Jalen Watson, L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, and Joshua Williams, who I liked. And then they have in the safety room, they did lose Juan Thornhill, but they have Justin Reed, second round pick from last year, Brian Cook, and then they have Shamari Connor, who I liked as a fourth round pick this year, and also Mike Edwards, who's a really underrated safety for the Bucs. So super solid defense, and it's pretty deep actually.
Yeah, always going to be solid. Always going to revolve around Chris Jones, who's just an absolute freak of a talent. One of the most underrated players. Even though he's at the top of his position, I still feel like he's always drastically underrated every single year. I mean, the dude's kind of doing it by himself up front and just making crazy plays. But overall, just a really solid defense. The Chiefs have really hit on their later round picks. Jalen Watson, 7th-round pick, an absolute stud. Shamari Connor, 4th-round pick. He's good. L'Jarius Sneed, 4th-round pick. Fantastic. So they've really done a good job, and they're very underrated at drafting these, later prospects and really, turning them into something special. But yeah, very, very solid defense.
Yeah, Steve Spagnuolo does a great job coaching these guys up. Just super solid defense. And now we'll get into our division predictions and our division award winners. So it should be fun. So many superstars and options in this division. So it's going to be a really tough choice. But who is your division MVP / offensive player of the year for the AFC West?
I wouldn't be a Chargers fan, and I would be going against my religion here if I didn't say Mr. Justin Herbert is going to be the offensive MVP of the AFC West this year. I think he's going to win MVP, and I think he's going to the Super Bowl and win an MVP. This dude just got paid the bag, and he's got the best roster that he might ever have. And I think the Chargers know it. This organization, these coaches know it. It's kind of all or nothing this year. And Justin Herbert, this dude's got a fire under it, lit under his ass. And, he played hurt last season. Not many people know that he had broken rib cartilages and a torn labrum in his left shoulder. So, I mean, the fact that he showed the toughness to play through the entire season, getting beat up and, playing through two, injuries that would be brutally hard to take hits to, you're taking hits constantly to the chest and the stomach, and, you're throwing on your shoulder every single play, and he's still going out there throwing 50, 60 balls a game, taking hits, and, staying in there and never complained once. I mean, this dude took a snap off against the Chiefs when that injury happened, and he was back in the next play and threw a 60-yard or 40-yard dot to DeAndre Carter on a rope with broken rib cartilage, so, Justin Herbert speaks for himself with how he plays, and his leadership is through his actions. And this dude is tough. And, I think this will be his year that, he's going to throw 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, and he's going to lead the Chargers far. So I think he'll take over Patrick Mahomes' crown just this season. It's not going to be permanently, but this season, this is kind of all or nothing for the Chargers.
Yeah, Kellen Moore and Quentin Johnson coming over definitely helps Herbert's chances at an MVP season. He definitely has that upside and that potential physically. He's got all the tools in the world. He's an absolute monster. I do think that's a bold pick just because of simply Patrick Mahomes. I have to pick Patrick Mahomes as my MVP. It would be just disrespectful not to. I understand you picking Herbert. He's got all the potential in the world, but just Patrick Mahomes, just come on. He's Mahomes. He's the best. He's the best quarterback in the NFL. He's going to win games by himself. He's going to be the most valuable player for the Chiefs and in the NFL. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's not too much you can say about Patrick Mahomes other than he's the best. So I have to go Mahomes.
He is the best, but sometimes the best have a down season, and it would be against my religion to bet against Justin Herbert because he's going to go out there and he's going to do something special this year. Clip it, put it on TikTok. It's happening. I need it to happen. Need it to happen for my mental health and sanity.
Fair enough. Let's hear your defensive player of the year for the AFC West, and there's a lot of options.
There's so many options in these divisions. There's so many good guys, but a guy who's just, I mean, he's an underrated player. He's an absolute stud. It's Chris Jones. I mean, this guy runs the Chiefs defense by himself. I mean, he's stopping the run. He's getting up there, getting sacks. I mean, this guy's production and what he does on the field is just so drastically underrated and undervalued. And right now, he knows it. He's holding out. He's looking for a bigger contract because he should be the highest paid defensive tackle in the league. Or right there with Aaron Donald, because this guy, the impact he makes is just speaks for itself. I mean, this dude is all over the field doing all the dirty work. And I think that there's nothing's going to change this year. So Chris Jones, my pick for defense player of the year.
Yeah, with Aaron Donald's injury last year, Chris Jones was the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL by far. He might have been top 3 defensive player of the year last year. He's just a beast. He can definitely be a defensive player of the year the way he played last year. If they can just keep that up, if the Chiefs can keep it up, he's an absolute monster in the interior. I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go with my favorite player right now, and that's Max Crosby. I just absolutely love the guy. He's a monster. Max Crosby has absolutely arrived as an alpha dominant number 1 pass rusher that you just truly need to double team. You have to double team Max Crosby at this point. I think he will very much finish in the defensive player of the year conversation this year. I think he'll be a top 3 to 5 edge rusher in the NFL. He's just a beast. He's an absolute monster. I think he'll be up there with the Bosa's, the Watt or TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, just in a top 5 with the best edge rushers in the NFL. He's so good. I think he's already there, honestly. If I'm being honest, he's such a monster physically. He's developed so much. His work ethic is some of the best in the NFL. I love Max Crosby, man. Such a fun player.
Yeah, I absolutely love that pick. Max Crosby, so underrated, such a difference maker. He's just kind of been doing it all for this Raiders defense, and it's going to be fun to see Tyree Wilson go over there because it should open up some more opportunities for more sacks for Max Crosby. So absolutely love that pick.
I definitely want to shout out Patrick Surtain as well for the Broncos. He's just an absolute shutdown corner, the best secondary player in this division for sure. It's just really hard for a corner to win an award like this. You need to have a lot of interceptions and you need to not give up that much, which is really hard for corner, which is the hardest position on defense. Let's hear your offensive rookie of the year for the division.
Feels like an obvious pick for me. Lock it in. Mr. Quentin Johnston. He's definitely in the best situation. He's definitely got the best odds. And it's just kind of an obvious pick. You have to lock it in here. Quentin Johnston's going to come in here. He's already earned a starting role on this Chargers team that's going to throw the ball almost, 50 times a game. They're going to be airing the ball down the field, and Quentin Johnston's going to be a big beneficiary of that. So just too easy of a prediction for me.
Yeah, it is too easy. Quentin Johnston isn't just too good of a situation, like you said. That Chargers offense is going to be just absolutely dynamic with Kellen Moore, and Quentin Johnston can do a lot of things. He can be really solid in the intermediate game, but he's also a big guy. If he can develop his ball tracking and hands, he can be a really dominant wide receiver 1 vertical threat with Mike Williams. So that can be really fun and really high upside option. I think the sky's the limit for Quentin Johnston and the Chargers. Absolutely love it.
Like you said earlier, Quentin Johnston, get him on your dynasty leagues. It might be 1 year before this guy's wide receiver 1. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both on max restructure contracts. Chargers are $60 million over the cap going into 2024. They're 2 big cut candidates. Make sure you get Quentin Johnston anywhere you can get him, especially dynasty, because he's got about a year before he takes over.
Yep, definitely. And then shout out Marvin Mims for the Broncos as well. He is the only receiver Sean Payton has handpicked for that Broncos offense. He drafted him. He definitely clearly liked him. He reminds me of kind of a Devery Henderson, a Marcus Colston, and those legendary Saints offenses, those receiver types that Sean Payton really likes. So I could see Marvin Mims developing into a good starter for the Broncos. Let's hear your defensive rookie of the year for the AFC West.
So my defensive rookie of the year, It's going to be a top 10 pick, Mr. Tyree Wilson. And I think, like I said, Max Crosby might be a beneficiary of Tyree Wilson. Tyree Wilson is definitely going to be a beneficiary of Max Crosby taking on double teams. And this guy is absolutely huge. Reminds me of Jason Pierre-Paul, former All-Pro, Pro Bowl defensive end. But this guy, he's coming into a great edge room, and he's learning from Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, one of the best. And I think there's just no way this guy is not putting up sack numbers in his rookie year. Too good of a situation, too good of a player not to. So easy pick for me here.
Yeah, if he can take over that starting role sooner rather than later, he can definitely win this award. He can maybe even win Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's that good. I'm gonna go a bold route. I think you're gonna like this one. I'm gonna go Chargers linebacker Dion Henley. I
Love it.
absolutely loved him as a prospect. I had him as a top 3 linebacker and I top 2 linebacker actually. And I think he's just a playmaker. He's just watching the film of this guy. He just pops. He's just a star. He's an athlete. He's a really fun player to watch. I'm just gonna call my shot that Dion will become the Chargers starting linebacker sooner rather than later, and he'll hold that spot. I think he's just like I said, a big playmaker. He makes so many plays for the defense. He turns the ball over. He's a former receiver, so he has just a knack for the ball and just ball skills and just making plays on the ball. I can truly see him being the defensive player of the year for this division, and I just think he's just so good at getting his hands on the ball and just being an incredible athlete and game changer. And I think he can be really fun for the Chargers.
Yeah, I absolutely love that pick, Dan. And especially, the Chargers are very linebacker friendly. The linebackers in this system do get a lot of tackles. And so that is a big thing. And I think, yeah, like you're right. I think Dion Henley is probably going to go in there and push Kenneth Murray for a starting position in camp, and he might even overtake him here in training camp. So I absolutely love that. And Dion Henley, he's a loud guy who can overtake a room. He's a funny interviewer. So he's gonna be on the spotlight. He's gonna be on the social media. And I absolutely love that. This guy kind of does everything. He does everything well. So I love it. I'm a Chargers fan. It makes me giddy. Makes me happy that you picked that. I love it.
Yeah, Eric Kendricks will definitely help him as well in that linebacker friendly system. And then I did want to shout out Felix Anudike-Uzomah from Kansas State for the Chiefs. He's definitely going to be a good edge rusher for them. I can see him starting very soon. But let's hear your division winner, the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's hear your AFC West division winner.
I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Wow.
I'm too high on my team. I think they're going to knock off the Super Bowl winning Chiefs. And, I think this is the year. Every year the Chargers play the Chiefs extremely close, and it ultimately comes up to an offensive battle. And the Chiefs have had so much better coaching, but, I can't preach about how much Kellen Moore is going to mean to this offense and how he's going to light up the scoreboard, and he's going to put the pedal to the metal, and he's going to be on the Chiefs' tail. I mean, so I think the Chargers, I think they'll maybe go 1-2 with the Chiefs during the regular season, but I think they finally win the division this year. And I think the Chargers roster is just flat out better than the Chiefs. And I think the Chargers have kind of designed their entire roster to beat the Chiefs. It's kind of the team that everyone's chasing, but the Chargers, specifically being a division rival, have kind of built a roster that is very friendly to playing the Chiefs and how the Chiefs play football. And so I think this is going to be the year the Chargers knock them off and finally win the division. It's been a long time. I think it's been since 2009 since they've won the division, but we're coming hot. And, I'm picking my Chargers. Bolt up, baby.
I like it. The Chargers do play the Chiefs really well. It seems like every time they play, it's just you never know who's going to win that game. The Chargers are really the one team that you can say that against the Chiefs.
Tucker kicking a 56-yard field goal in overtime. Seems like that's been the difference.
There's always something like that, yeah. But as a Broncos fan, I wish I could pick the Broncos. I feel like I have to go with the Kansas City Chiefs. They're just, until proven otherwise, they're just too dominant, too good. With Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, like you said, I just can't pick against them. They're going to be just so good. The AFC is very loaded, so they could, lose some games in their schedule. they might not be the first seed, but I do think in the end, ultimately, the Chiefs will be up there. AFC Championship. I don't even know how many years in a row it's been. It's been every year that Patrick Mahomes has started. They've been in the AFC Championship, which is just a truly incredible stat. It's just legendary stuff, GOAT stuff. And we're witnessing a very legendary battle between Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes at the top of the AFC West, between the Chargers and Chiefs. And it's going to be really fun for the next few years, and especially this year, to see if the Chargers can overtake the Chiefs like you're predicting. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'll cross my fingers, but yeah, I get it. Chiefs, it really is only fair to pick the Chiefs till proven otherwise. But like I said, I have to ride with my boys. I think this year will be the year. But understandably, you gotta go pick the Chiefs really until proven otherwise.
Yeah. All right. This AFC West deep dive is really fun. Definitely one of the more fun divisions to talk about. One of the more competitive divisions. It's going to be really fun to see how it plays out. We have the NFC South deep dive next week, so stay tuned for that and for more deep dives and fantasy football episodes. Check out the NFL Seekers podcast. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Have a
Yes,
good one.
sir.
Peace.